Finally, after like 8 months, Cinematic has actually come out in its entirety. Good morning, I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and yeah, let's get into the review for this album. Firstly, two quick things I need to mention actually before I start it. I'm so sorry to all the people that don't give a single shit about Owl City that I've had to subject to so many videos. If it helps, there will be no more videos on this topic ever again from me. Secondly, some of you may be aware of one of my very good friends called Pranav Sood. Well, he released a music video, I think like yesterday, so I'm going to link it down there. You should all go check it out. It's from his debut EP. It's called Sanguine EP. If you go onto any kind of streaming services, it will be there. I produced, I think, the 4th track on there. It's called Just Go. But yeah, I produced that one. What he released yesterday is called Hold On. So go check it out. Like I said, there'll be a link in the description. Give it a listen, give it a thumbs up if you like it. Let's get into the review. As anyone who's got this far into the video will know, he's already released 3 EPs or reels for it, and I'm not going to be talking about any of the tracks on those. There will be links down there to each review I've done of all of the work that's gone towards creating this whole album. I'm only going to be talking about the tracks that have not been released yet, that none of us have heard, and then I'll kind of do a quick overview at the end. So track number 1, House Wren. Now, I think I need to start this by giving a quick shout out to the absolutely marvellous poster, Give Me House Wren or Give Me Death, who has been making me chuckle several times on the Owl City subreddit. At least I hope it's posting. If it's legitimate obsession, then it's a bit worrying, but either way it made me laugh. This is a pretty upbeat, quirky, funny song. The lyrics are a little bit strange at times, but it carries a lot of the sort of semi-traditional Owl City instrumentation that we've come to expect thus far. He's been using a lot of more organic orchestral samples, and there's that kind of generic click that he has introducing the beat in the song. And this song also has a small example of one of those melodies that he used to occasionally pop into his older tracks. And I'm not talking about the melody that everyone knows he uses in basically every song. I'm talking about the one he uses in songs like Terminals and a whole load of others, but yeah, it's quite nice to hear that in there. House Wren is a decent song, I guess. There wasn't anything about it that I found particularly special or intriguing, and I really strongly dislike any whistling in any song pretty much ever, and I feel like he's tried to use whistling in like 3 or 4 different tracks now, and every time I just hate it. So apart from that, it's fine, but like nothing special. Next track we hadn't heard was called Always, and boring. I'm sorry, it's just really boring. I was honestly tempted to skip it after a couple of minutes on the very first listen. There was just nothing that I found interesting about it at all. The instrumentation is dull and unimaginative, and the lyrics are the same. I get so frustrated with his more recent Christian songs that he's released. There's a YouTuber called ARTV who does lots of really good Owl City reviews as well, and he said something in a video I think a few years ago that I completely agree with, which is basically that Owl City used to make actually interesting and, you know, profound Christian songs. He was one of the few artists that could sort of make Christian songs lyrically interesting. Think of songs like Galaxies, This Is the Future, Meteor Shower, you know? Whereas now we have songs like You're Not Alone and My Everything, which are just sort of generic, boring, I love God, isn't God great Christian songs, which they're just not interesting. There's enough of that music out there. And he's made Christian songs that have a more interesting lyrical context to them. It's just, I don't know. And I find that his Christian songs are always accompanied with an equally uninteresting instrumentation. There's nothing like egregiously terrible about it. It's just boring. I probably will never listen to it again after the 4 or 5 times I listened to it for the purpose of doing this review. The only sort of slightly redeeming qualities I found about it was the French horn passage in the pre-chorus. I thought sounded quite nice, and the heavier section towards the end was a bit of an improvement. It kind of at least added a tiny bit of sort of diversity to the sound of the song, but not enough to redeem it. So the next track is called Winners Never Quit, and I like how this starts. It's got kind of chiptune vibe to it with the synths that he used in the intro. I felt like I would have liked it if the song had developed in more of that way instead of it doing that and then suddenly going away, but it's got a decent rhythm, that kind of backing guitar that he's got going for it. Pretty solid track though, I did enjoy it. Next song to talk about is called Madeline Island. Now the very beginning of this is basically identical to the beginning of Bass Camp from his Everest score. That 3-note ascending synth passage is exactly the same in both of them. It's just a bit higher and faster in Madeline Island. And then all those rhythmic backing strings come in, and I found it not out of place, just not that interesting. I feel like there are a few tracks that's his instrumentation to start a song. It's just, you know, some spiccato rhythmic strings going on and then him singing over the top, and eventually there'll be a that comes in as well, you know. It's just not that interesting. I feel I wanted a bit more electronic stuff, but not boring electronic stuff. I don't know, I'll probably never be pleased with anything. Yeah, the strings came in and it sounded fine. It just, I wasn't like, oh, that's an interesting thing to do. It's not bad, it's just I'm listening to it and thinking, I've heard all these sounds before, Adam, like lots of times. That being said, I do really like this track. It's got a heavier chorus, kind of similar to the harder bits in Be Brave that I thought was a nice contrast. One thing that I did really like, and it's a tiny, tiny detail, was in the line, it was all a blur. On the word all, there's a cheeky little bit of vibrato. Now, I'm not sure if that's genuine. I listened to it several times, and I think it might be a kind of an automated vibrato, similar to Post Malone in the high bits of the chorus of Rockstar. That kind of tremolo effect that goes onto his voice. I feel like it might be a little bit of modulation going on there, but it's not a problem. But it sounded really cool. It sounded interesting, and it gave a kind of an extra dimension to his voice. One of my main problems with a lot of these tracks is that the vocals nearly always seem to be very, very dry, and you know, they're produced well. You know, he's very good at recording his own voice, but I feel like sometimes there's no sparkle to the sound at all. It almost sounds kind of sterile and a little bit monotone, but in that one word, just that little bit of modulation, if it was modulation, maybe he sung it, I don't know, if he did then great, but that little change just, it makes it more interesting, and think about that when you're listening to that passage. Anyway, I do really like this song. It's got that kind of triumphant, bombastic feel to the chorus, and I like the reprise at the end of the track where you've got all of those field recordings that he's put in there. It's nice. It kind of reminds me of the end of tracks like I'll Meet You There or something. Right, next track, Firebird. This is probably the most obvious and consistently rocky song on there. Lyrically, he seems to be talking about a relationship he has with his brother, but I'm fairly sure that he's an only child. I don't know. Let me know if I'm wrong about that. Maybe he's got loads of siblings. I like this track. It doesn't really mess around at all. It sort of just gets straight into it, and the chorus has got a really nice feel to it. I felt at times that the chorus didn't hit as hard as I wanted it to. And there's another example of that kind of old-fashioned melody that he used in songs like Terminals after the line, I'll go get your mum, or whatever it is. The chugging power chords that come in after that line work really well also. It kind of just gives a lot of extra energy and drive to the song, and there are some really spicy synth lines that come in as well. But yeah, aside from the boring melody that he uses in this track, as well as about 8 other tracks on the album, I do like this one. It's got a lot of energy to it, kind of like Embers or the harder bits of Be Brave. And now we move on to Cinematic, the title track for the album. This track seems to blend a whole load of things that we've heard on the other tracks into one. It's like an amalgamation of the different styles on the record. So in the intro, we've got the rhythmic spiccato strings that he uses quite a lot, and then we've got a sort of lucid dream style synth that comes in, and then finally some actually dreamy, atmospheric, distant vocals. I really love the intro to this track, but then it reverts back to just being strings and really dry vocals, so I don't know. And when the percussion comes in, it sounds really nice. And overall, I feel like it works really well, especially the chorus. I do like the chorus, but it was nowhere near as sort of epic or interesting as I was hoping for from the title track. The synth solo in the chorus is really cool, and then when it goes back to sort of the way that the intro sounded, I really like that bit, but I'm not totally sure about the lyrics in this song. I mean, occasionally they're kind of clever, but I kept thinking every time I listened to it, who is it that you're talking to? Who are you referring to when you're saying all of this? Because if the lyrics aren't really addressing anyone specific, and they're just going to any general person with the idea of being like, hey, you're great, listen to this song and be inspired and all that kind of stuff, then it just ends up feeling really generic and really empty. It's like the lyrics for Verge. I mean, they were not great lyrics, were they? No. Not at all. And I know that on this record, the lyrics were always going to be more literal and kind of tell stories in that sort of way. But the lyrics to this song, while they may seem slightly inspirational if you're watching them in the context of a Disney film, just sort of come across as a bit empty and like a little bit soulless. I feel like such a bastard saying that. And I'm not gonna lie, I did genuinely cringe when he sang the line, "May the Force be with you." And don't get me wrong, I don't hate the track. I think there's a lot going on for it. Bits of it are very interesting and quite well done. I just felt that considering it's the title track for an 18-song album, it left a lot to be desired. It just wasn't as huge as I was hoping it to be. And that concludes Cinematic, but wait. There's more, because now we get on to the alternative versions. Now, on this album, Adam was kind enough to include 3 alternative versions of some of the songs on there. So one was All My Friends, the other was Montana, and then there was Firebird. The first alternative version song that we hear is of All My Friends, and let's just call a spade a spade. The song is shit. I'm sorry, it's just not a good song, and I don't care how much the instrumentation changes or that Brianne Duran is singing on this one. It's just a shit song, and that's fine. Like, you can love an artist and think one of their songs is shit, or you can, if you love the song, then that's fine. It's your prerogative. You like what you want to like. I just think it's shit, and I listened to the alternative version, and I was like, yeah, this is still shit. It's just slightly less shit than the previous one. The lyrics are still the same, the melodies are still the same, the weird rapping bit still exists. Like, the fact that it's got a softer instrumentation doesn't mean that it's not still shit. I'm sorry, I've said shit so many times. Have you ever heard the expression, you can't polish a turd? Well, yeah. That. The second alternative track is Montana, and now we're getting into some really, really lovely stuff. These alternative versions, I really feel, are him throwing some sky sailing at us, because everyone always goes on at him about sky sailing, and this is the best example of him doing that, I think. The chorus of this is just really, really wonderful. It sounds so lovely. He's using very similar sounding percussion as he did in Sailboats from Sky Sailing, so it's like a proper hark back, and the way he's kind of softly singing in that kind of more whispery tone, it works really well. I think this is better than the original version. One issue that I do have with it, in my first review for Montana, I said that I thought the chorus was great, but the verses were a bit dull, and that's still the same in this track, to be honest. I listen to that song because I want the chorus. I'm not concerned with the rest of it. I'm just kind of waiting for those bits to finish so that I can hear the chorus, and it's a shame, but it does sound absolutely lovely. So yeah, that's a really good song. And then the final track on Cinematic is Firebird alternative version. It's nice to hear a much softer, stripped down version of what is probably the kind of most consistently heavy track on the album. The thing is that melody that I mentioned in like the first video I ever made about this album, I'd listened to that melody so many times by the point that I was actually listening to the last track on this album. I was so sick of hearing it, and it's so obvious in this song. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about when I keep referring to this melody, watch my reaction to the previews that came out, because I talk about it there. But yeah, having that at the very end kind of just exemplifies what I mean about him using that so often. I really think he should just ban himself from ever using it and see if he can actually write a piece of music that doesn't include it that he's still happy with. It's just lazy self-plagiarism. Yeah, the alternative version of Firebird is really, really nice. I like the contrast with the other vocalists that he's got to sing in towards the end of it. I think one of them is probably Abby, but again, I don't know. I don't know who the other person is. There's a male voice that isn't his. It'd be cool if it was Matt from Reliant K. So yeah, it's really nice, but my favorite of the alternative versions is definitely Montana. So there we go. It's finally over. Now, I'd say that my 5 favorite tracks from Cinematic as a whole, in no particular order: Fiji Water, Be Brave, Montana alternative version, Firebird original version, and then that really, really cool mashup of Cloud9 and New York City. So a few final thoughts. Now, I think that this is a relatively strong album. Is it better than Mobile Orchestra? Yes. Is it better than the Midsummer Station? Yes, at least as a whole it is. I mean, Silhouette is a wonderful song. And it definitely feels like the most organic album that he's released under the name Owl City for, you know, half a decade or so. You know, there are no forced collaborations or unnecessary generic pop tracks. Is it better than All Things Bright and Beautiful and then everything that came before that? To me, no, definitely not. Definitely not. But at the same time, that's not so much to do with him and more to do with me. I've done a video, which will be linked down there. It was a review of Mobile Orchestra, but I also called it Owl City, Where Did the Magic Go? Which is where I kind of go into a bit more depth as to why I feel like people like me and people, you know, who are my age feel sort of disenchanted with a lot of Owl City's newest music. Like I said, I think that this is a fairly decent Owl City album. It's certainly better than the 2 that came before it, but than the other 3, no. But then I don't think anything ever could compare, because for me, part of why I love those albums is because I've been listening to them for so long and they bring back memories. So who knows, maybe in 5 years' time I'll be listening to the tracks from Cinematic and they'll bring up memories of this time in my life, and then it'll have more meaning. But yeah, it's a good album. I'd give it a B. I will say something now which, you know, may be viewed as somewhat controversial. I kind of hope that this album release marks the end of Owl City. I hope that he no longer makes music as Owl City. Not because I don't want him to make any more music. I just feel like he's exhausted that reservoir of sort of creativity. I mean, we're hearing the same melodies repeated. We're hearing familiar sounds. And as long as he's releasing music under the name Owl City, people will always want the same thing. They'll want him to make music that sounds like his old stuff. It's just going to be sort of frustrating for everyone involved if he keeps making Owl City records. But yeah, I think it would be cool if he stopped Owl City now and released more music, more diverse music as well, you know, like Color Therapy. That album, Mr. Wolf is Dead, that he released under that name, that's good, that's gritty, that's got some intrigue and originality to it. That's, you know, you listen to that and you can tell it's him, but it sounds fresh, it sounds original, and I feel like I want more music like that. I want him to go and join an ambient post-rock band and make music with them. So yeah, there we go. That concludes my review of Owl City's newest release, Cinematic, and if you made it all the way to the end of the video, then congratulations. It's a very, very solid effort. Enough about what I think. Let me know what you think. What do you think of the album? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you agree with what I've said? Do you disagree with things I've said? Do you want to call me a massive because I said that I didn't like All My Friends again? Go ahead, just do all of that down in the comment section there. And like I said, there'll be links in the description to all of the other videos I've done on Owl City, as well as my friend Pranav Sood's new music video. So go check that out. Watch the other videos if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I really do hope that you've enjoyed this. Have an absolutely fantastic day, and I will see you very soon.